3 years after the woman he loved tried to kill his mother, Justin Miller received a letter from prison, and the words inside shattered everything he thought he knew about that day. He almost didn't open it. The envelope sat on Justin's kitchen counter for 2 days, postmarked from Cedar Junction, Audrey's name in the corner. He walked past it every morning, every evening, pretending it wasn't there. 3 years had passed since that hospital room. 3 years since he'd watched them take her away in handcuffs. 3 years of rebuilding a life he thought he understood. Michelle was strong now, healthy, back in her own place. And Justin, for the first time since that day, had started to let someone in again. Sarah, a therapist he'd met through his grief counselor. Kind, patient, real in ways Audrey never was. But the letter changed everything. Justin finally opened it Thursday night, alone, the city glowing below his window. 3 handwritten pages. Audrey's voice, raw and desperate in ways he'd never heard before. And buried in the middle of her apology, one sentence that stopped his heart. "Your mother wasn't just sick, Justin. She was being poisoned." The pages slipped from his hands. Because if Audrey was telling the truth, if any of this was real, then someone else had tried to kill his mother first. Someone who was still out there. Someone who might try again. But before we continue, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Because sometimes the truth we think we know is only the beginning. Justin called Detective Ramirez at 7 in the morning. She answered on the 3rd ring, voice thick with sleep. "Miller, what's wrong?" "Audrey sent me a letter. She's claiming my mother was poisoned before the incident, that she found a vial of digoxin in Michelle's hospital room." Silence. "Detective, I'm coming to you. Don't touch the letter again." She arrived within the hour, jeans, sweatshirt, badge on her belt. Justin handed her the letter, sealed now in a plastic bag. Detective Ramirez read it slowly. When she finished, she looked up. "You believe her?" "I don't know." She set the letter down. "We ran a full tox screen 3 years ago. Came back clean. But if someone stopped before she was hospitalized, digoxin clears the system in about 36 hours. Ramirez leaned back, thinking. If they timed it right, we'd never find it. Justin's chest tightened. "It's also possible," Ramirez continued, her voice careful, "that Audrey's building a parole defense, manufacturing doubt, making herself look like a victim instead of an attempted murderer." "I know, but you're not sure." Justin shook his head. "I was sure about her 3 years ago. I was wrong about everything." Ramirez studied him. "I'll look into it. Pull hospital records, interview staff. But don't tell your mother yet. Not until we know more." After she left, Justin sat in the silence of his apartment, staring at nothing. If someone had poisoned Michelle, if someone wanted her dead badly enough to be patient, careful, calculated, then saving her once wasn't enough. They might come back, and this time he might not see it coming. That night, Sarah noticed immediately. They were at dinner, their usual place, quiet corner table, candles between them. She'd been talking about her day, but Justin couldn't focus. "You're not here," she said gently. He looked up. Sarah's eyes were warm but direct. They'd built something honest together over 8 months. She deserved the truth. "I got a letter from Audrey." Sarah's expression didn't change, but her hand stilled on her wineglass. "What did it say?" He told her. The poisoning claim, the vial, Detective Ramirez, and underneath it all, the fear that maybe he'd been wrong, that maybe Audrey had been drowning instead of calculating. Sarah was quiet when he finished. Then, "What do you think?" "I don't know what to think anymore." "Do you think she's lying?" "Maybe. Probably." Justin's voice cracked. "But what if she's not?" Sarah reached across the table, her hand covering his. "Justin, even if she was broken, even if she was in crisis, what she did was still a choice. Mental illness doesn't erase that. And whatever else is true, you saved your mother's life that day." He wanted to believe her. "But there's something else," Sarah said, her voice dropping. "If someone really did poison Michelle, they're still out there." The words hung between them. Justin had spent 3 years trying to move forward, trying to heal, trying to trust again. And now the past was rising up, pulling him back into a nightmare he thought was over. His phone buzzed. "Detective Ramirez," he answered. "Did you find something?" "I pulled the hospital records." Her voice was tight. "Justin, there were 3 visitors, logged for your mother the week before the incident. You, Audrey. And someone who signed in as A. Miller. Justin's blood went cold. I don't have any siblings. I know. Who was it? That's what I need to figure out. But Justin, Ramirez paused. Whoever they were, they visited your mother alone, 3 times, and the nurses don't remember them. Justin's hands started shaking. Someone had gotten to his mother, someone who used a fake name, someone who disappeared before anyone thought to look. Sarah was watching him, her face pale. There's more, Ramirez said. I talked to the hospital pharmacist. A vial of digoxin went missing from their supply 2 weeks before your mother was admitted. They wrote it off as a clerical error. Justin couldn't breathe. This wasn't random, Ramirez continued. This was planned, careful. And if Audrey's telling the truth about finding that vial, if she really did stumble into someone else's crime, then we need to figure out who A. Miller is, fast. Justin ended the call, his mind racing. Someone had tried to kill his mother 3 years ago. Someone, patient, methodical, invisible, and they were still out there, watching, waiting, maybe planning to finish what they started. Justin told his mother the next morning. He'd promised Detective Ramirez he'd wait, but sitting across from Michelle at breakfast watching her butter her toast, humming softly to herself, he couldn't keep it from her. Mom, we need to talk. Something in his voice made her set down her knife. What happened? He told her about the letter, about the digoxin, about someone signing into the hospital as A. Miller and visiting her 3 times. Michelle's face went pale. Do you remember anyone unusual visiting you that week? Justin asked. Anyone who seemed off? She was quiet for a long moment, her hands trembling slightly around her coffee mug. I was so sick, sweetheart. There were so many nurses, so many faces. I barely remember anything clearly. Try, Mom, please. Michelle closed her eyes, reaching back. There was a woman, I think. She came in one afternoon when you were at work. Said she was from patient services, checking on my comfort level. What did she look like? Older, maybe 60, short grey hair, kind smile. Michelle's eyes opened. She asked me questions about my medications, about my care. I thought she was just being thorough. Justin's stomach dropped. Did she touch anything? Your IV? Your medication? I don't. Michelle's voice cracked. I don't remember. Justin, what if she... Don't. He reached across the table, gripping her hand. Don't go there yet. We don't know anything for sure. But they both knew. Someone had walked into that hospital room, smiled kindly at a sick woman, and poisoned her. That afternoon, Justin sat in his office, staring at 3 years of financial records spread across his desk. If someone wanted Michelle dead, there had to be a reason. Money, business, revenge. He started with his company's competitors, executives he'd undercut, deals that went south, partnerships that ended badly. Nothing stood out. Then he looked at personal enemies, ex-girlfriends before Audrey, business associates who felt cheated, people he'd fired over the years. Still nothing. His phone rang. Sarah. Hey, he answered, his voice flat. How's Michelle? Scared, trying not to show it. Sarah was quiet. And you? Justin leaned back, pressing his palms against his eyes. I don't know how to protect her from someone I can't see. You're not alone in this. You know that, right? He wanted to believe her. But 3 years ago, he'd trusted Audrey to sit with his mother. He'd trusted his own judgment. And he'd been catastrophically wrong. Justin, listen to me. Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. Whatever's happening, you didn't cause it. You're not responsible for other people's evil. Then why does it keep finding us? She didn't have an answer for that. Detective Ramirez called an hour later. I got the security footage from the hospital. 3 years old, but it's something. And the woman who signed in as A. Miller kept her head down every time she passed a camera, like she knew where they were. But I got one partial shot, enough to run facial recognition. Justin held his breath. Nothing came up. Whoever she is, she's not in the system. No criminal record, no driver's license match. Nothing. So we're back to nothing. Not nothing. I'm working a theory. Ramirez paused. Justin, is there anyone in your mother's life, past or present, who might benefit from her death? Old friends, distant family, anyone with a grudge? My mother doesn't have enemies. She's the kindest person I know. Sometimes that doesn't matter. Sometimes people want things that someone else is standing in the way of. Justin's mind went blank. His mother had nothing, no wealth of her own, no property except the house he'd bought her, no connections to powerful people. Unless... His breath caught. "What?" Ramirez asked. "You thought of something?" "My father," Justin said slowly. "He left when I was 7, walked out on us. Mom never asked him for anything, no child support, no alimony, nothing. She just let him go." "You think he'd come back after 40 years to kill her?" "I don't know. But Mom inherited her father's estate when he passed away 5 years ago. It wasn't much, maybe 200,000. But she never told anyone about it except me." "Where's your father now?" "I have no idea. Haven't spoken to him since I was a kid." Ramirez was quiet. Then, "I'll find him." After she hung up, Justin sat in the silence of his office, a chill running down his spine. His father, a man who'd abandoned them without looking back. Could he really come back decades later to take the one thing Michelle had left? And if he could, what else was he capable of? Detective Ramirez found him in 48 hours. Marcus Miller, age 72. Living in a suburb outside Philadelphia under his own name, working part-time at a hardware store. "He's been there for 6 years, Ramirez said over the phone. "Quiet life, no criminal record, pays his taxes." Justin gripped his phone tighter. "Did you talk to him?" "Not yet. I wanted to ask you first, do you want to be there when I do?" Every cell in Justin's body screamed, "No." But he heard himself say, "Yes." He didn't tell Michelle where he was going. Just kissed her forehead that morning and said he had meetings in Philadelphia. She smiled, told him to drive safe, and went back to her crossword puzzle. The lie tasted bitter. Justin drove 3 hours in silence, his mind spinning. The last time he'd seen his father, he was 7 years old, watching through the living room window as Marcus loaded a suitcase into his car and drove away without looking back. Michelle had cried for weeks. Justin never did. He'd just gone quiet, turned all that abandonment into fuel, studied harder, worked longer, built an empire to prove he didn't need the man who left. And now, 40 years later, he was about to face him. The hardware store was small, tucked between a laundromat and a diner. Detective Ramirez was waiting in the parking lot when Justin arrived. "You ready?" she asked. Justin nodded, though he wasn't sure that was true. Inside, the store smelled like sawdust and paint. An older man stood behind the counter, ringing up a customer. Grey hair, reading glasses, flannel shirt. Justin's breath stopped. It was him, older, smaller somehow, but unmistakably the man who'd walked out of their lives. The customer left. Marcus looked up, ready to greet the next person. His eyes met Justin's, and something in his face crumbled. "Justin?" The sound of his name in his father's voice felt like a punch. Detective Ramirez stepped forward, showing her badge. "Mr. Miller, I'm Detective Ramirez. I need to ask you some questions about your ex-wife, Michelle." Marcus's face went pale. "Is she okay?" "That's what we're trying to determine." Ramirez's voice was measured. "Can you tell me where you were 3 years ago? Specifically, in April? 3 years ago?" Marcus looked between them, confused. "I don't why. Just answer the question." "I was here, working. I've been here for 6 years. I haven't left Philadelphia." "Have you had any contact with Michelle Miller during that time?" "No, none. I haven't spoken to her in 40 years. Justin's voice came out cold. "Why would you?" Marcus flinched. "Justin, Did you know she inherited money?" Justin cut him off. "From her father, 5 years ago." Marcus's face shifted genuine surprise. "No, I didn't know that. You expect us to believe you just happened to stay away all these years? Never once thought about coming back for a piece of what she had?" "I didn't know she had anything." Marcus's voice cracked. "And I left because I was a coward, not a thief." "Then why did you leave?" The question hung in the air. Marcus looked down at his hands. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "Because I was drowning. Your mother was so strong, so capable, and I felt useless next to her. Every day, I felt smaller. And instead of being a man about it, instead of working through it, I ran." Justin's jaw clenched. "I've regretted it every day since," Marcus continued. "I thought about reaching out 1,000 times. But what was I supposed to say? Sorry, I abandoned you both. Sorry, I was too weak to stay. That would have been a start." Marcus looked up, tears in his eyes. "I know. And I'm sorry, Justin. I'm so sorry. But I swear to you, I didn't hurt Michelle. I wouldn't. I loved her once. I still—" His voice broke. "I still think about her. Wonder if she's okay." Detective Ramirez watched him carefully. "Can anyone verify your whereabouts 3 years ago?" "My boss. My landlord. I haven't missed a day of work in 6 years." Ramirez nodded. "I'll need their information." She stepped outside to make calls, leaving Justin alone with his father. The silence stretched between them, 40 years of it, thick and suffocating. "You look just like her," Marcus finally said. "Your mother. You have her eyes." Justin didn't respond. "I heard you did well for yourself. Built something big." "No, thanks to you." Marcus nodded slowly. "You're right. Everything you are, you got from her, not me." Justin turned to leave. "Wait." Marcus's voice stopped him. "If someone hurt Michelle, if she's in danger, please protect her. She deserves that. She always did." Justin looked back at the broken man behind the counter, and for the first time, he didn't see a villain. Just a coward who'd spent 40 years living with his shame. Outside, Ramirez was ending a call. She looked at Justin. His alibi checks out. He was working the day those hospital visits happened, time-stamped employee records. Justin exhaled slowly. "It's not him," Ramirez said, which meant the woman with grey hair, the one who'd smiled kindly at Michelle and poisoned her, was still a ghost. Still out there. Still hunting. Justin drove back in silence. His father's face burned into his mind. Not the villain he'd imagined for 40 years. Just a weak man who'd run from his own shame and never found the courage to come back. It didn't make Justin forgive him, but it made him human. Sarah was waiting at his apartment when he got home. She'd let herself in with the key he'd given her 2 months ago, a decision that had terrified him at the time. "How'd it go?" she asked, setting down her book. Justin collapsed onto the couch beside her. It wasn't him. She didn't say anything, just took his hand and waited. "He's just broken," Justin finally said. "Spent 40 years working at a hardware store, living alone, carrying the weight of what he did. And I wanted him to be the villain so badly. I wanted it to be simple. It never is." Justin leaned his head back, staring at the ceiling. "If it's not him, then who? Who would want my mother dead?" Sarah shifted, tucking her legs beneath her. "What if it's not about your mother at all?" He looked at her. "What do you mean? What if she's just in the way of something? Or someone?" The thought had crossed Justin's mind, but hearing Sarah say it out loud made it real. "You inherited everything when your grandfather died, right?" Sarah continued carefully. "The estate went to Michelle first, then eventually to you. Yeah, but it wasn't much. A couple $100,000, some land upstate she's never done anything with. Land? 40 acres, woods mostly. My grandfather used to hunt there." Sarah's expression shifted. "Justin, have you checked what that land is worth now?" He hadn't. 2 hours later, they sat at Justin's laptop. Property records spread across the screen. The land Michelle inherited wasn't just woods anymore. A development company had been buying up surrounding parcels for the past 3 years, paying premium prices, big money. The kind that turned quiet forest into luxury estates. And Michelle's 40 acres sat right in the middle. "They can't develop without her land," Sarah said quietly. "She's blocking the entire project." Justin's chest tightened. "Has anyone approached her about selling?" "I don't know. Has she mentioned anything?" He called Michelle immediately. She answered on the second ring. "Justin, it's almost midnight. Mom, the land upstate. Has anyone tried to buy it from you?" Silence. "Mom, there was a woman," Michelle said slowly. "About 4 years ago. She came by the house. Said she represented a development firm, made a very generous offer. What did you tell her?" "I said no. That land was your grandfather's. It felt wrong to sell it." "What did she look like?" "I don't. Older, I think. Grey hair. Very polite." Justin's blood went cold. "Mom, did she come back? After you said no?" "Once or twice. The last time was." Michelle paused. "Right before I got sick. She called, said the offer was still open. I told her I wasn't interested. And then you ended up in the hospital." The silence on the other end was deafening. "Justin, you don't think. I think you need to stay with me for a while. Pack a bag. I'm coming to get you." "Justin, you're scaring me." "Good. You should be scared." An hour later, Michelle was in his guest room. The door locked, security system armed. Sarah had stayed, refusing to leave them alone. She made tea while Justin called Detective Ramirez, explaining what they'd found. "I'll pull records on the development company first thing tomorrow," Ramirez said. "Get names, financials, see who's behind it." When Justin hung up, his hands were shaking. Sarah handed him tea. "She's safe now." "Is she?" Justin set the cup down without drinking. "Someone poisoned her, Sarah. Came into her hospital room 3 times and poisoned her. They didn't care that she was sick. Didn't care that she almost died. But she didn't die. You saved her. And now what? We wait for them to try again?" Sarah sat beside him. "No. Now you let Detective Ramirez do her job. You keep Michelle close, and you stop carrying this alone." Justin looked at her, this woman who'd walked into his shattered life 8 months ago and stayed when most people would have run. "Why are you still here?" he asked quietly. "What? You know what my life is. The mess, the danger, the woman in prison who tried to kill my mother. Why haven't you left?" Sarah's eyes softened. "Because I see you, Justin. Not your money, not your success, not even your trauma. Just you. And you're worth staying for." Something in his chest cracked open. He pulled her close, holding on like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting beneath him. "I'm terrified I'll lose you too," he whispered. "You won't. You can't promise that." "No," Sarah said softly. "But I can promise I won't leave by choice. Whatever comes, we face it together." Justin wanted to believe her, but he'd believed Audrey once too, and that belief had almost cost him everything. Detective Ramirez showed up at 8 in the morning with a file folder and a grim expression. Michelle was still sleeping. Sarah had left an hour earlier for work, making Justin promise to call if anything happened. "Tell me you found something," Justin said, pouring coffee. Ramirez opened the folder. "The development company is called Pinnacle Ridge Holdings, registered in Delaware, which makes tracking ownership complicated. But I dug deeper." She slid a document across the table. "The CEO is a woman named Helen Vance, 63 years old, gray hair. Fits your mother's description of the woman who approached her about the land." Justin stared at the photo clipped to the page. Professional headshot. Kind smile. The face of someone you'd trust. "She's got a clean record," Ramirez continued. "No arrests. Successful career in real estate development. On the surface, she's legitimate. But 3 years ago, Pinnacle Ridge was hemorrhaging money. They'd bought up all the surrounding land for this development project, took out massive loans, and your mother's 40 acres was the last piece they needed. Without it, the whole project dies. They default on loans worth $30 million. Justin's stomach turned. So, she had motive. Strong motive. Ramirez pulled out another page. "I compared the hospital sign-in records with Helen's known whereabouts. She was in the city the week your mother was poisoned. Stayed at a hotel 2 miles from the hospital. That's not enough to arrest her." "No, it's not." Ramirez leaned forward. "But Justin, there's something else. I pulled Helen's financial records. 2 days after your mother was hospitalized, Helen withdrew $15,000 in cash. No record of what it was for." "You think she paid someone?" "I think she paid Audrey." Justin's chest went hollow. "What?" "Think about it. Audrey was drowning in debt. Desperate. Helen knew about your relationship easy enough to find out. What if Helen approached Audrey, offered her money to finish what the poison hadn't?" The room tilted. "Audrey's letter said she found a vial of digoxin in your mother's room," Ramirez continued. "What if that wasn't an accident? What if Helen left it there deliberately, made sure Audrey would find it?" Justin could barely breathe. "You're saying Helen manipulated Audrey into trying to kill my mother?" "I'm saying it's possible. Audrey was unstable, broke, terrified of losing you. Helen could have planted the idea, made it seem like mercy instead of murder." Justin stood, pacing. His mind was racing. If this was true, if Helen had poisoned his mother and then manipulated Audrey into finishing the job, then everything he thought he knew was wrong. Audrey wasn't the villain. She was a weapon someone else had used. "I need to talk to her," Justin said. "To who? Helen?" "To Audrey." Ramirez's eyes widened. "Justin, if Helen approached her, if any of this is real, Audrey would know. She'd remember. She's in prison. And even if you could see her, why would she tell you the truth? Because she has nothing left to lose." Justin grabbed his jacket. "And because 3 years ago, I didn't listen when she tried to explain. Maybe I should have. The prison was 2 hours north. Justin drove alone, his hands tight on the wheel, his mind spinning through every conversation he'd had with Audrey before that day. Had there been signs? Moments where she seemed scared instead of calculating? He'd been so sure she was a monster. But what if she'd just been desperate? Used by someone smarter, colder, more patient? The visitation room was stark. White walls, metal tables, guards stationed at every corner. And then she walked in. Audrey looked different. Thinner, hair shorter. No makeup. Prison had stripped away every polished layer she'd hidden behind. She stopped when she saw him, her eyes filling with tears. Justin. He gestured to the chair across from him. She sat slowly, like she couldn't believe this was real. "I got your letter," Justin said. "I didn't think you'd come. I didn't think I would either." He leaned forward. "Tell me about Helen Vance." Audrey's face went pale. "You know who I'm talking about?" "Yes." "Did she pay you?" Audrey's hands trembled on the table. "Not directly." "What does that mean?" She closed her eyes. 2 weeks before what happened, a woman came to my apartment, said she'd heard I was in financial trouble, offered to help. Helen. She didn't give her name. She knew everything, Justin. How much debt I had, that I was about to lose my apartment, that your mother didn't approve of our engagement. Justin's fists clenched. She said your mother was suffering, that the pneumonia was worse than anyone knew, that maybe it would be kinder to let her go peacefully. Audrey's voice cracked. She made it sound like mercy. "Did she give you money?" $10,000. Cash. Said it was to help me get back on my feet, to give us a fresh start after. She couldn't finish. Justin felt sick. I didn't know what she meant at first. Not really. But then I found that vial in your mother's room, and something in my head just broke. I thought she was dying anyway. I thought I was helping. You were killing her. I know. Tears streamed down Audrey's face. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life knowing that. But Justin, I didn't plan it. I was manipulated, used. That doesn't make it okay. I know. They sat in silence. Finally, Justin asked, "Will you testify?" "Against Helen?" Audrey looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. "If it means stopping her, yes." Detective Ramirez moved fast. Within 24 hours, she had a warrant to search Helen Vance's office. Bank records, email correspondence. Anything that could link her to Michelle's poisoning. Justin waited at home with his mother, watching the clock. Michelle was quieter than usual. She sat by the window, staring out at the city, her coffee growing cold in her hands. "Talk to me," Justin said. She turned, and he saw something in her eyes he hadn't seen before. Fear, yes, but also something deeper. Sadness. "I keep thinking about that woman," Michelle said softly. "Helen. She came to my house, smiled at me, complimented my garden, and the whole time she was calculating how to kill me." Justin moved to sit beside her. "She's going to pay for what she did. Will she? Women like that always find a way out." Michelle's voice was tired. "They hire good lawyers, blame other people, walk away clean while everyone else suffers. Not this time." Michelle looked at him. "You sound so sure." "Because I am. I won't let her get away with this." She reached for his hand. 3 years ago, you saved my life by acting on instinct. But Justin, sometimes justice takes more than instinct. Sometimes it takes patience you don't have." He knew what she meant. Every cell in his body wanted to drive to Helen's office, confront her, force a confession. But that wasn't how this worked. Evidence, process, the law. It felt too slow. The call came at noon. Detective Ramirez, her voice tight with controlled fury. "We've got a problem." Justin's stomach dropped. "What happened?" "Helen's lawyer showed up with a cease and desist. Claims we're harassing his client, threatening her business. He's blocking the search warrant. He can't do that. He can tie it up in court for weeks, maybe months." Ramirez exhaled slowly. "And that's not all. Helen just filed a defamation lawsuit against you. Claims you're spreading false accusations that are damaging her reputation." Justin's hand tightened on the phone. "She's trying to intimidate us. She's succeeding. Her lawyer is Thomas Garrett, best defense attorney in the state. If this goes to trial, it's going to get ugly. I don't care. Justin, listen to me. Women like Helen don't play fair. She's got money, connections, and a legal team that will shred anyone who gets in her way. If we're going to take her down, we need to be smarter than her. How? We make her think she's winning. We back off publicly, let her lawyers celebrate their victory, and we build the case quietly where she can't see it. Justin hated it, but he trusted Ramirez. Okay, what do you need from me? Keep your mother safe, stay visible, act like you've given up. Ramirez paused. And whatever you do, don't contact Helen directly. That's exactly what she wants. That night, Sarah found Justin on the terrace, staring at the city lights. Michelle's asleep, she said, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. Finally. Justin didn't respond. Sarah moved closer. You're thinking about going after her yourself? No. Justin. He turned to face her. What if Ramirez is wrong? What if backing off gives Helen time to disappear, to cover her tracks? Then you trust that the detective knows what she's doing. I trusted Audrey. Look how that turned out. Sarah's expression softened. This isn't the same thing, isn't it? I'm supposed to just sit here while the woman who poisoned my mother walks free. You're supposed to let the people who know how to catch her do their job. Sarah stepped closer. Justin, you can't control everything. You can't save everyone by sheer force of will. Sometimes you have to trust the process. The process is too slow. The process is all we have. He wanted to argue, but looking at Sarah steady, patient, refusing to let him spiral, he felt something shift. 3 years ago, he would have charged in, alone, made demands, forced confrontation. But that version of himself had almost gotten his mother killed. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe trust wasn't weakness. Maybe it was the only way forward. The text came at 3 in the morning. Unknown number. 5 words that made Justin's blood run cold. Stop digging, or she dies. Attached was a photo. Michelle, asleep in his guest room, taken through the window. Someone had been watching them. Someone was inside his building. Justin's hands shook as he dialed 911, but deep down, he already knew. Helen wasn't backing down. She was escalating, and this time, she wasn't going to miss. Police arrived within minutes. 4 officers swept the building, checked every floor, every stairwell, found nothing. Detective Ramirez showed up 20 minutes later, still in sweatpants, her badge clipped over a Georgetown hoodie. She studied the photo on Justin's phone, her jaw tight. Professional, she said. Telephoto lens, taken from the building across the street. Justin looked out the window. Dozens of apartments faced his, hundreds of windows, impossible to know which one. She's hired someone, Ramirez continued. Someone good. Michelle emerged from the guest room, wrapped in Justin's robe, her face pale. What's happening? You're leaving, Justin said. Both of you, right now. Sarah appeared behind Michelle, already dressed. Where are we going? Somewhere Helen can't find you. Within an hour, they were packed. Justin drove them to a hotel 40 miles outside the city, small, quiet, the kind of place that didn't ask questions. He registered under Sarah's name, paid cash, and got them a room on the 3rd floor with no windows facing the street. Stay here, he told them. Don't leave. Don't call anyone. I'll check in every few hours. Michelle gripped his arm. What are you going to do? End this. Justin. Mom, she took a picture of you sleeping, through my window, in my home. His voice was steady, but his hands shook. I'm not waiting for her next move. Sarah pulled him aside. Don't do anything stupid. I won't. Promise me. He looked at her, this woman who'd chosen to stand beside him through all of this, who could have walked away a dozen times but stayed. I promise. He kissed her forehead and left before she could see him cry. Back at his apartment, Justin and Detective Ramirez sat in the dark. We need to draw her out, Ramirez said. How? Give her what she wants. The land. Justin's head snapped up. You want me to sell? I want you to pretend to sell. Set up a meeting. Get her on record, admitting what she did. She'll never confess. Not to you, but maybe to someone she thinks she's won. Ramirez leaned forward. We wire you. You offer the land. Act defeated. Let her gloat. People like Helen can't resist. Justin thought about it. The risk, the chance it could go wrong. But what choice did he have? Set it up. The call came the next morning. Helen Vance's assistant, professional, courteous, scheduling a meeting to discuss the property matter. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock, Helen's office. Justin agreed. When he hung up, his hands were steady for the first time in days. He called Michelle. "How are you holding up?" "Scared, but okay." Her voice was small. "Sarah's taking good care of me." "Good. Stay there. This ends tomorrow." "Justin, be careful. Please." "I will." But they both knew careful wasn't always enough. That night, Justin couldn't sleep. He stood on his terrace, remembering the last time his world had shattered. 3 years ago, hospital room, pillow, the moment everything changed. He'd been so certain then that Audrey was the enemy. He'd been wrong, and now he was about to face the real enemy, a woman who'd poisoned his mother, manipulated a desperate girl into attempted murder, and threatened them from the shadows. A woman who thought money and lawyers made her untouchable. His phone buzzed. "Sarah, I know you're not sleeping. I know you're scared, but you're not alone. Whatever happens tomorrow, we face what comes after together." Justin read it 3 times, then typed back, "I love you." 3 words he hadn't said to anyone since Audrey. 3 words that terrified him more than any threat. Sarah's response came immediately. "I love you too. Now get some rest. You're going to need it." Justin smiled, despite everything. Tomorrow, he'd walk into Helen Vance's office, wearing a wire. Tomorrow, he'd get the confession that would put her away. Tomorrow, he'd finally protect the people he loved. Or die trying. Detective Ramirez taped the wire to Justin's chest at 1:30. "It's voice-activated," she said, adjusting the small device. "Just act natural. Get her talking about the land, about your mother. If she mentions the poisoning, even indirectly, we've got her." Justin buttoned his shirt. "What if she knows? Then we abort." But Helen's arrogant. She thinks she's already won. 2 unmarked cars would be parked outside Helen's building. Ramirez would be monitoring from across the street. If anything went wrong, they'd move in. "You ready?" she asked. Justin nodded, though his heart was hammering. Pinnacle Ridge Holdings occupied the 20th floor of a glass tower in the financial district. Justin stepped off the elevator into a lobby that screamed money. Marble floors, modern art. A receptionist with a practiced smile. "Justin Miller, for Miss Vance. She's expecting you. Conference room 2. He followed her down a corridor, his pulse loud in his ears. The conference room overlooked the city, floor-to-ceiling windows, a table that could seat 20, and at the head of it, Helen Vance. She stood when he entered, grey hair perfectly styled, tailored suit, that same kind smile Michelle had described. "Mr. Miller, thank you for coming." Her handshake was firm, confident. They sat. "I understand you're ready to discuss the property," Helen said, folding her hands on the table. "I am. I'm glad. I know this hasn't been easy. Your mother was quite attached to that land." "She was." Helen's smile widened. "Was?" Justin forced himself to stay calm. "She's reconsidering. Recent events have made her realize it's not worth the trouble." "Recent events?" "The stress. Her health hasn't been good." Helen tilted her head, studying him. "I heard she was ill a few years ago. Pneumonia, wasn't it?" "Yes." "Terrible thing. My mother died of pneumonia." Helen's voice was sympathetic, but her eyes were cold. "Sometimes the body just gives up fighting." Justin's jaw clenched. "My mother's stronger than that." "Of course." Helen opened a folder. "I'm prepared to offer $5 million for the 40 acres, well above market value. Your mother would be very comfortable." "That's generous." "I believe in fair deals, Mr. Miller. Everyone should benefit." Justin leaned forward. "Even if it means people get hurt along the way?" Helen's smile didn't waver. "I'm not sure what you mean. I mean the woman who visited my mother in the hospital 3 years ago, the one who signed in as a—" "Miller." The temperature in the room dropped. Helen set down her pen. "That's a serious accusation." "Is it an accusation if it's true?" "I think you're confused. Grief can do that. Make us see patterns that aren't there. Someone poisoned my mother. Someone tried to suffocate her. Your fiancée, if I remember correctly. She's in prison for it. Because you paid her." Helen laughed light, dismissive. "Mr. Miller, I understand you're protective of your mother, but you're grasping at straws. I'm a businesswoman. I make deals. I don't commit crimes. Then you won't mind the police investigating." "They already did. Found nothing." Helen stood. "Now, if you're not here to discuss the land seriously, I think we're done." Justin stayed seated. "You made one mistake." "Oh?" "Audrey kept the cash you gave her. $10,000, sequential bills, and she's willing to testify where it came from. Helen's face went still. The police are pulling your bank records right now, Justin continued. They'll match the withdrawal, and once they do, everything unravels. The poison, the hospital visits, all of it. Helen walked to the window, her back to him. When she spoke, her voice was different, colder. Your mother's land is the last piece of $100 million project. I've invested everything, loans I can't repay without it, my entire life's work. So you tried to kill her? I tried to solve a problem. Helen turned, and the mask was gone. She was old, sick. What was a few more months? A year? I was simply accelerating the inevitable. Justin's blood ran cold. But she didn't die, Helen continued. And that girl Audrey, she was supposed to finish it quietly. Instead, she panicked, made a scene, got herself arrested. You manipulated her. I gave her an opportunity. She took it. Helen's eyes were ice. Just like you're taking this opportunity right now. $5 million, Justin. Your mother lives comfortably. I get my land. Everyone wins. Except you go to prison. Helen smiled. You think you've won because you're wearing a wire? I've had this room swept for surveillance every morning for 3 years. That device under your shirt stopped transmitting the moment you walked in. Justin's heart stopped. My security is thorough, Helen said softly. They jammed the signal. Everything you think you recorded? Static. She moved toward the door. But here's what's going to happen. You're going to sell me that land, and you're going to keep your mouth shut. Because if you don't, if you continue this crusade, I'll finish what I started. Your mother, that girlfriend of yours, anyone you care about. You're threatening me. I'm promising you. Helen opened the door. You have 48 hours. After that, I stop being patient. She walked out. Justin sat frozen, his mind racing. The wire was dead. No confession, no evidence. Just a threat he couldn't prove. Justin walked out of that building with his hands shaking and his mind clear. Detective Ramirez was waiting in the surveillance van, her face grim. The wire went dead the second you walked in. She jammed it. I know. Justin, I'm sorry. We've got nothing. He pulled out his phone. Actually, we do. Ramirez looked at him. You told me to act natural, Justin said. So I brought my phone, left it recording in my pocket the whole time. He played it back. Helen's voice, crystal clear. I tried to solve a problem. She was old, sick. I was simply accelerating the inevitable. And then, that girl Audrey, she was supposed to finish it, quietly. Ramirez's eyes widened. You got her. Every word. Within an hour, patrol cars surrounded Pinnacle Ridge Holdings. Helen Vance was arrested in her office, her lawyer already on the phone, her face pale with fury. This is entrapment, she screamed as they cuffed her. You'll never make this stick. But Justin knew they would, because Helen's arrogance had made her careless, and carelessness left trails. 3 months later, Helen Vance pled guilty to attempted murder, conspiracy, and witness tampering. 25 years, no parole. Audrey's sentence was reduced to 4 years, with time served. She'd cooperate fully, testify against Helen, and get the psychiatric help she should have received from the beginning. Justin visited her one last time before she was transferred to a minimum security facility. Thank you, Audrey said quietly, for believing me. Finally, I should have listened 3 years ago. You weren't ready. Neither was I. She paused. I heard you're getting married. Justin nodded. Sarah had said yes 2 weeks ago. Small ceremony. Just family. She's lucky, Audrey said. I'm the lucky one. Take care of your mum, Justin. She's a good woman. I wish I'd seen that sooner. They said goodbye. Not with forgiveness exactly, but with something like understanding. Sometimes broken people do terrible things, and sometimes terrible things lead to healing no one expected. The wedding was in Michelle's garden. 20 people, evening light. Sarah in a simple white dress that made Justin's breath catch. Michelle stood beside him, healthy and strong, tears streaming down her face. You ready? She whispered. Terrified. Good. That means it's real. When Sarah reached him, when he took her hands and looked into her eyes, Justin felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because everything was perfect, not because the past didn't hurt, but because he'd learned something these 3 years had taught him. Love isn't about certainty. It's about choosing someone, even when you're scared, trusting even when you've been betrayed, showing up even when it's easier to run. His mother had shown him that his whole life, and now Sarah was teaching him to believe it again. "I love you," he said. "I love you too." They kissed, and in that moment, surrounded by people who'd fought beside them, Justin understood what his mother had been trying to tell him all along. True wealth isn't what you build. It's who stands with you when everything falls apart. That night, Justin and Michelle sat on his terrace, the city glowing below them. "You saved me twice," Michelle said softly. "Once in that hospital room, once by not giving up when everyone told you to. You saved me first. Every day of my life." She smiled. "That's what mothers do, and that's what sons do too." They sat in comfortable silence, watching lights flicker on across the city. Somewhere out there, Helen was in a cell. Audrey was getting help, and his father was living quietly with his regrets. But here, right here, there was healing. "You know what I realized?" Justin said. "God gave me that instinct 3 years ago, that pull to come back to the hospital, and he gave it to me again when I recorded Helen on my phone." Michelle squeezed his hand. "Sometimes grace shows up as gut feelings, and sometimes it shows up as second chances, or both. Or both. If this story touched something deep in you, if it reminded you that even broken people can heal, that justice sometimes takes time, and that the people who love you are worth fighting for, please like, share, and subscribe to Elevated Heart Stories. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to choose between justice and revenge? Because maybe this story found you for a reason. In the golden evening light, mother and son sat together, knowing that some battles are worth fighting, some people are worth protecting, and some loves are worth trusting, even when you're terrified. Justin had built an empire once, but sitting here with his mother, with Sarah inside making tea, with a future that finally felt possible. This was the only empire that mattered, and he'd spend the rest of his life protecting it.
Charles came home at 2:47 a.m., exhausted, ready to collapse into bed. But when he opened his bedroom door, he froze. His children's nanny was asleep in his bed, with Sophia and Nathan curled up on either side of her. And the house was silent. Charles Williamson hadn't heard silence like this in years. His wife Diane died 4 years ago during childbirth. The twins, Sophia and Nathan, came into the world the same moment she left it. They were 4 now, and almost every night since they were old enough to understand loss, they woke up terrified, screaming, crying, convinced that sleep meant disappearing forever, just like their mother did. Charles had tried everything. 17 nannies, specialists, therapists, millions of dollars. Nothing worked. Then, 3 weeks ago, the preschool called. Both children had fallen asleep during class and woke up hysterical. The teacher couldn't calm them. Other parents wanted them removed. That night, Charles made one last desperate call. "I need someone who understands grief, real grief. I'll pay anything." The agency sent Rachel Baker, 29 years old, no fancy degree, just a woman who'd lost her husband and baby daughter 6 years ago and somehow learned how to help broken children heal. When she arrived, she didn't bring protocols or plans. She just knelt down, looked at Sophia and Nathan, and said quietly, "I used to be scared to sleep too. After someone I loved went to heaven." Sophia whispered, "You were?" "Yes, but I learned something that helped." And for the first time in a long time, Charles saw something flicker in his children's eyes. Hope. What he didn't know was that 3 weeks later, everything would change. Before we continue, like this video, subscribe, and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Because sometimes, when we've tried everything and feel completely alone, God sends exactly who we need, in the most unexpected way. The scream came at 2:34 a.m. Charles didn't need an alarm anymore. His body knew. 4 years of this, and he could feel it coming. That moment right before the terror started. "Daddy!" He was already moving. Down the hallway, barefoot, heart pounding. The children's room glowed with soft nightlights, stars on the ceiling, clouds on the walls, everything designed to bring peace. It never did. Both beds were empty. Sophia and Nathan huddled under the desk, clutching each other. Sophia's face streaked with tears, Nathan shaking so violently he couldn't speak. "She was here," Sophia whispered. "The shadow lady. She stood right there." Charles dropped to his knees, reaching for them. "There's nobody here, baby, I promise." "You always promise." Sophia's voice cracked. "But she keeps coming." Nathan finally spoke, his voice so small it barely made a sound. "Mommy promised too." And she left. The words shattered something inside Charles. 4 years old. They were 4 years old and already believed that promises meant nothing. He pulled them close, carried them to their beds, lay on the floor between them, holding their small hands in the darkness. "I'm right here. I won't leave." Sophia's grip tightened. "What if you close your eyes and disappear?" "I won't." "You don't know that." She was right. He didn't. And that terrified him more than anything. He stayed there for 2 hours, waiting, listening to their breathing slow, feeling their hands relax just enough that he thought, maybe, they'd finally fallen back asleep. He started to pull his hand away. Both children's eyes shot open. "Don't go!" So he stayed, on the floor, staring at the ceiling, watching the stars fade as morning light crept through the windows. His phone buzzed. A text from his CFO, board meeting at 9, critical, be there. Charles looked at his children, Sophia's hollow eyes, Nathan's trembling hands, the exhaustion carved into their small faces. He'd tried 17 nannies, specialists from the best hospitals, therapists, sleep consultants, millions of dollars spent. Nothing worked. And the worst part? He was starting to forget what his children's laughter sounded like. When the sun finally rose, Charles helped them downstairs, made breakfast they wouldn't eat, watched them sit at the table, too tired to even cry anymore. That's when his phone rang. The preschool. Charles's stomach dropped. It was only 7:45 a.m. School didn't even start until 8:30. "Mr. Williamson?" The director's voice was tight. "We need to talk about Sophia and Nathan, today, before you bring them in." Charles closed his eyes. What happened? "Yesterday. There was an incident. Other parents are concerned. We need to discuss whether—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Charles looked at his children, Sophia staring at nothing, Nathan's hands shaking around his juice cup, and he realized they were running out of time. Charles sat in the preschool director's office an hour later. Mrs. Palmer had always been kind. Today, her face looked different. "Yesterday during nap time, both children fell asleep at their tables." Charles leaned forward. "That's the first time they've slept during the day, and when Miss Caroline tried to wake them, they started screaming. Sophia wet herself. Nathan threw up. 16 other children saw it happen." Charles felt something break inside him. "Parents have called, Mr. Williamson. They're frightened. We love your children, but we're not equipped for this. They need help we can't provide." The drive home was silent. The children fell asleep in their car seats, finally asleep. Charles kept checking the mirror, waiting for the screaming to start. It didn't. When he pulled into the driveway, Nathan's eyes opened. "Daddy?" His voice was barely a whisper. Did Mommy die because she fell asleep? Charles nearly hit the brakes. What? She was sleeping and then she never woke up. So if we sleep, do we die too? Charles turned around, looked at his 4-year-old son who'd just connected sleep with death in his small, terrified mind. "No, buddy. Mommy had a sickness. Sleep didn't hurt her." Nathan's eyes said he didn't believe it. Sophia whispered, "Then why does the shadow lady come every time we close our eyes?" Charles had no answer. That night, after another battle, after lying on their floor for an hour, after they finally collapsed from exhaustion, Charles sat in his study at midnight. His hands trembled as he dialed. "Pemberton Agency. My name is Charles Williamson. I need help." His voice cracked. "I've tried 17 nannies, every specialist, every therapy. My children are 4 years old, and they think sleep is death. I need someone who understands grief, real grief, someone who's lost everything. I don't care about cost or credentials. I just need someone who can help them believe it's okay to close their eyes. Silence. Then, Mr. Williamson, I have someone. Rachel Baker, 29, no degree. She lost her husband and infant daughter 6 years ago. Every child she's worked with has healed, but she's unconventional. What does that mean? She doesn't follow traditional methods. Some families love her, others don't understand her approach. But if she comes, it's because she believes God put her there for a reason. Charles closed his eyes. When can she start? If she says yes tomorrow afternoon, tell her yes, please. The next day, Charles stood at his window at 3 p.m. A 15-year-old Honda Civic pulled into his driveway beside his Tesla. The door opened. A young woman stepped out, jeans, simple shirt, canvas bag over her shoulder. Charles opened his front door, and Rachel Baker looked up at him with eyes that had seen the same kind of loss he carried every single day. Rachel stood at the door, smaller than Charles expected. No briefcase, no confidence, just a young woman with a canvas bag. Mr. Williamson, I'm Rachel. Charles stepped aside. She walked in, looked around at the high ceilings, the lake view through the windows. He waited for the usual reaction. Instead, Rachel said quietly, "Beautiful home. But they don't need beautiful. They need safe." "They're upstairs. They won't come down when strangers come." Rachel set her bag down. "Can I go up?" "I'll show you. I'll find them." She smiled. "Sometimes it's better if they don't see you watching." Charles stayed at the bottom of the stairs, listening. Rachel's voice came soft through the door. "Hi. Are you Sophia and Nathan?" Silence. "I'm Rachel. I'm not here to make you do anything. I just wanted to meet you." Nothing. "Can I tell you something?" Charles moved closer, staying out of sight. "I used to be scared at night too," Rachel said. "After my baby went to heaven. Her name was Emma. She was 6 months old." Charles froze. "Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her, or I'd dream about her and wake up and she'd be gone all over again. So I stopped sleeping. For a really long time." Sophia's small voice. "You stopped sleeping too?" "Yeah, because it felt like losing her again every time." Silence. Nathan whispered, "Did the shadow lady take her?" Rachel took a breath. "I don't know about a shadow lady, but something took her from me, and I was scared that if it could take her, maybe it could take everyone." "That's why we can't sleep," Sophia said. "I know, honey." "But you sleep now?" "I do. It took time. But I learned something." "What?" "That the people we love don't leave us just because we close our eyes." Footsteps. Then the door opened. Rachel stood there with both children holding her hands. Charles stared. Sophia and Nathan, who hadn't touched a stranger in months, were holding her hands like they'd known her their whole lives. "Mr. Williamson, can we go outside? I think fresh air would help." As they walked past, Sophia looked back. "Daddy, Rachel's baby went to heaven too, like Mommy." Charles watched them walk into the backyard. Rachel knelt in the grass between them, talking softly. For the first time in 4 years, his children looked calm. But what Charles didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that Rachel didn't just come to help his children sleep. She came to break every rule he thought mattered. And it would start that very night. That evening, Charles watched from the kitchen doorway as Rachel made dinner with the children. She wasn't doing anything special, just letting them help stir pasta, taste the sauce, laugh when flour dusted Sophia's nose. Simple things, normal things. Things Charles couldn't remember happening in his home for 4 years. "Daddy, look." Nathan held up a spoon. "I'm helping." Charles smiled, but something ached in his chest. How had this stranger walked into his house 6 hours ago and already made his children laugh? After dinner, Rachel glanced at the clock. Almost 7. "Should we get ready for bed?" Charles tensed. This was when everything usually fell apart. But Sophia just nodded. "Okay." Rachel stood, took both children's hands. "Let's go pick out pajamas." Charles followed them upstairs, staying back. He watched Rachel kneel beside their beds, talking softly while they changed. No rush, no forcing, just presence. "All right," Rachel said. "Who wants to hear a story?" "What kind of story?" Sophia climbed into bed without being asked. "A story about two brave kids who learned they were stronger than they thought." Nathan crawled into his bed, too. "Are we the kids?" Rachel smiled. "Maybe." Charles stood in the doorway, watching her sit on the floor between their beds. She pulled a small book from her bag, worn, pages soft from use. She began reading. Her voice was calm, gentle, the kind of voice that made you feel safe without trying. Sophia's eyes started to close. Charles held his breath. Nathan yawned. This couldn't be real. They never did this, never just settled. Rachel kept reading, her voice steady, unhurried, and slowly, impossibly, both children's breathing deepened. They were falling asleep. Charles felt tears burn his eyes. Rachel finished the story, set the book down, but she didn't get up. She pulled a thin blanket from her bag and spread it on the floor between the two beds. Charles stepped forward. "Ms. Baker, you don't have to." Rachel looked up at him. "Yes, I do. There's a guest room right down the hall. You'll be comfortable there." "They won't be." Her voice was quiet but firm. "They need to know I'm not leaving, so I'm staying right here all night." "That's not necessary." "Mr. Williamson." Rachel's eyes held his. "How many nannies have you hired?" 17. "And how many of them stayed in this room all night?" Charles was silent. "None of them, right? They all went to their rooms, left the monitor on, checked in when the kids screamed. But they left. That's standard practice. Standard practice doesn't work for children who think being alone means dying." Rachel lay down on the floor, pulled the blanket over herself. "I'm staying. If you want me to leave in the morning, I understand. But tonight, I'm staying." Charles opened his mouth to argue. Then Sophia whispered in her sleep, "Don't go." And Rachel whispered back, "I'm here, sweetheart, right here." Charles backed out of the room, closed the door halfway, went to his study, sat in the dark. At 2:47 a.m., he checked the monitor on his phone. The children were still asleep. Rachel was still on the floor. And Charles realized he had no idea what he'd just let into his home. Charles woke at 6:30 a.m. He sat up in bed confused. Dawn light streamed through the windows. Then it hit him. He'd slept. Actually slept. For the first time in 4 years, he hadn't woken to screaming at 2 a.m., or 3 a.m., or 4 a.m. His phone was silent, no alerts from the monitor. Charles grabbed it, hands shaking, pulled up the camera feed. The children's room was peaceful. Morning light glowed across 2 small beds. Sophia was curled under her blanket, breathing softly. Nathan's arm hung off the side of his mattress, fingers relaxed. And Rachel, still on the floor between them, blanket pulled to her chin, eyes closed. They'd slept, all of them, the entire night. Charles stood, walked down the hall in bare feet, pushed open the door carefully. The room smelled like lavender. A small diffuser sat on the dresser, something Rachel must have brought. Soft music played from a phone, so quiet he could barely hear it. Rachel's eyes opened. She looked up at him, put a finger to her lips. Carefully, she stood, stepped over her blanket, and slipped out of the room. Charles followed her downstairs. In the kitchen, she poured water into a glass, drank slowly. "They slept," Charles whispered. His voice broke. "They actually slept." Rachel nodded. "They woke up twice, around 1 and 3, but I just reminded them I was there. They went right back down." "How did you—" Charles couldn't finish. 17 nannies, 5 specialists. How did you do that in one night?" Rachel set down the glass. "I didn't do anything special, Mr. Williamson. I just stayed. That's all they needed. Someone who wouldn't leave. But the others tried. They tried from another room. They tried with monitors and schedules. But your children don't need monitoring. They need presence, real physical presence. They need to open their eyes in the dark and see someone there." Charles leaned against the counter. 4 years of agony, 4 years of exhaustion, and this woman had solved it by sleeping on the floor. "I don't know what to say," Rachel smiled gently. "You don't have to say anything. Just let me keep doing this. It'll take time, maybe weeks, but they'll heal, I promise. You're staying? If you'll have me." Charles felt something he hadn't felt in years, relief. Real, overwhelming relief. "Yes, please. Stay as long as they need you." Rachel nodded. "Then I should probably tell you something." "What?" "This is just the beginning. What I did last night, sleeping on their floor. That's the easy part." Charles frowned. "What do you mean?" Rachel looked toward the stairs, then back at him. "Your children don't just need someone to stay in their room, Mr. Williamson. They need to feel safe in yours." "I don't understand." Rachel's eyes held his. "You will. Soon." And before Charles could ask what she meant, footsteps sounded from upstairs, Sophia's voice still sleepy but calm. "Rachel?" Rachel smiled. "Duty calls." She headed upstairs, leaving Charles standing alone in the kitchen. And he had no idea that what she'd just said would change everything. 3 weeks passed. The children slept through most nights now. Not perfectly. They still woke sometimes, still called for Rachel. But the screaming had stopped. The terror had faded. Charles watched his children transform. Sophia laughed again. Nathan ate breakfast without coaxing. They played in the backyard, told stories, drew pictures. Rachel still slept on their floor every night. She never complained, never asked for anything. Just stayed. Charles tried to thank her once. She'd smiled and said, "You don't thank someone for doing what they're supposed to do." But Thursday afternoon, his CFO called. "We have a crisis in Los Angeles. The client's threatening to pull the entire contract. You need to be there, tonight." Charles looked at Rachel, panic rising. "I can't leave them." Rachel knelt beside Sophia and Nathan, who'd heard and were already clinging to their father. "Daddy has to go help people with work," she said gently, "just like doctors help sick people. But he's coming back, I promise." "When?" Nathan's voice trembled. "Tomorrow. 1 sleep and he'll be home." Sophia looked at Rachel. "Will you stay?" "I'm not going anywhere." Charles flew to Los Angeles, spent 18 hours in meetings, kept checking his phone, photos from Rachel, the children smiling, playing, eating lunch, a video, Nathan waving. "Hi, Daddy, we miss you, but we're okay." Charles landed Friday at 2 a.m., exhausted, empty. He just wanted to collapse into bed. The house was dark when he walked in. Silent, beautiful, peaceful silence. He climbed the stairs, loosened his tie, pushed open his bedroom door, then froze. His bed, the king-sized bed where Diane used to sleep, where he'd spent 4 years alone, wasn't empty. Rachel lay in the center, peaceful, breathing softly. Sophia curled against her left side, small hand clutching Rachel's shirt. Nathan nestled against her right side, head on her shoulder. All 3 sleeping. The baby monitor on the nightstand read 2:47 a.m. Charles stood there, briefcase still in his hand, mouth open, unable to move. This was his bed, his private space, the room where his wife had died, where he'd grieved alone for 4 years, and this woman, this nanny, was sleeping there with his children, every professional boundary shattered, every rule broken. His first instinct was anger. She'd crossed a line. This wasn't appropriate. This was... Then he looked at his children's faces, completely at peace, no trembling, no fear, just rest. For the first time in their entire lives, they were sleeping in their father's room, in the space that smelled like him, in the bed that represented safety and presence. And they weren't alone. Charles backed out slowly, closed the door, walked downstairs in the dark, sat at the kitchen table, hands shaking. What had just happened? What was Rachel doing? And why, despite every logical reason to be furious, did seeing his children finally at peace make him want to weep? At 6:30 a.m., he heard footsteps on the stairs. Rachel appeared in the doorway, eyes widening when she saw him. Mr. Williamson, I can explain. Rachel stood in the doorway, still in yesterday's clothes. Her voice was quiet. I can explain. Charles set down his coffee cup. You slept in my bed. Yes. With my children. Yes. Silence filled the kitchen. Rachel stepped closer, sat down across from him. They needed to sleep where you sleep, where it smells like you, where they can feel you even when you're not there. You could have told me. Would you have said yes? Charles didn't answer. Your children have primal abandonment trauma, Rachel said softly. Their mother died the moment they were born, so to them, your absence equals death. When you left for Los Angeles, their bodies believed you might not come back. They needed to be in your space, to feel surrounded by you, but they also needed someone to stay with them, someone to prove they weren't alone. So you broke every professional boundary. Rachel met his eyes. Yes, I did. Why? She was quiet for a moment. Then, because 6 years ago I was 23 years old. I had a husband, a baby girl named Emma. She was 6 months old. Charles's chest tightened. We were driving home from dinner. A drunk driver ran a red light. My husband died instantly. Emma, her voice cracked. Emma died 3 days later in the hospital. I was the only one who survived. The kitchen went completely silent. For 2 years I wanted to die too, Rachel continued. I couldn't understand why I lived and they didn't. But then I started volunteering with children who'd lost parents. And I realized something. I couldn't save my daughter, but I could help other children feel safe again. So that's what I've done. I break rules, I cross lines, I do whatever it takes to give children what they actually need, not what protocols say they should have. She looked at him. Your children needed to sleep in your bed last night. They needed to feel you close, and they needed me to stay so they knew they weren't alone. So yes, I broke the rules. And if you want me to leave, I understand. But I need you to know, it worked. They slept. They felt safe. And that matters more than any boundary I crossed. Charles felt tears burning behind his eyes. You lost everything when you were 23. So did you. So did they. He looked down at his hands. 4 years of exhaustion. 4 years of failing his children. And this woman, who'd survived the unthinkable, had given them peace by doing the one thing no one else dared to do. Are you staying? His voice was barely a whisper. Because if you leave now, they'll break again, and He stopped. I don't think any of us can survive that. Rachel reached across the table. I'm staying, as long as you need me. What if they need you forever? She smiled gently. Then I guess I'm staying forever. Footsteps sounded from upstairs, small feet running. Rachel, Sophia's voice called out. Where are you? Rachel stood. I should go, but before she left, she turned back. Mr. Williamson? Your children don't need a nanny anymore. They need someone who's willing to love them the way their mother would have. And sometimes that means breaking every rule in the book. She disappeared upstairs, and Charles sat alone, realizing that everything he thought he knew about healing, about boundaries, about what his children truly needed, had just been completely shattered. 2 months passed. The house felt different now, lighter, like something heavy had finally lifted. Sophia and Nathan slept through most nights. Sometimes they woke and called for Rachel. She'd come, sit on the edge of their beds, whisper something gentle. They'd close their eyes again. But the terror was gone. Charles watched his children become children again. They laughed, played, told jokes. Sophia started drawing pictures of butterflies. Nathan learned to ride his bike without training wheels. And Rachel, she was just there, always there, making breakfast, reading stories, sitting in the backyard while they chased each other through the grass. One evening, Charles came home early, found Rachel and the children in the kitchen, flour everywhere, attempting to make cookies. Daddy, look! Nathan held up a misshapen blob. I made a dinosaur, Sophia giggled. That's not a dinosaur, that's a blob. It's a blob dinosaur. Rachel laughed, really laughed, and something in Charles's chest shifted. He couldn't remember the last time he'd heard joy like this in his home. That night, after the children were asleep, Charles found Rachel sitting on the back patio. She looked up when he approached. "They're getting better," she said softly. "Because of you." "No, because they finally feel safe." Charles sat beside her. "When I hired you, I thought you'd just be another nanny, another failed attempt," Rachel smiled. "And now? Now I don't know what you are." His voice was quiet. "You're not just the nanny anymore. You're part of them, part of us." Rachel looked away. "I should probably tell you something." "What?" "I haven't slept in their room for 3 weeks now. I sleep in the guest room. They're ready for that. They know I'm close, but they don't need me on the floor anymore." Charles felt something catch in his throat. That's incredible." "It is, but there's something else." "What?" Rachel turned to him. "Last week at preschool, Sophia's teacher asked who takes care of her at home, and Sophia said, 'My mommy, Rachel, and my daddy.'" The words hit Charles like a wave. "She called you mommy." "I didn't tell her to. She just did." Charles was quiet for a long moment. "Does that bother you?" "No." Rachel's voice was gentle. "It breaks my heart and heals it at the same time." "What do you mean?" "It breaks my heart because I know I'm not replacing their mother. I could never do that. But it heals it because—" She paused. "Because maybe this is why God let me survive when Emma didn't. So I could be here. For them. For you." Charles looked at her. Really looked at her. This woman who'd walked into his life with nothing but a canvas bag and a broken heart. Who'd given his children peace when millions of dollars couldn't. "Rachel, I need to ask you something." She met his eyes. "Are you staying? Really staying? Because you've become so essential to them, to us, that if you left now, I'm not leaving." "But what if—" Rachel reached for his hand. "Charles, I'm not leaving. Not tomorrow, not next month, not ever, unless you ask me to." The air between them felt different, charged with something neither of them had named yet. "What if I don't want you to be the nanny anymore?" Charles whispered. Rachel's breath caught. "What do you mean?" "What if I want—" A sound from inside, Nathan's voice, sleepy but calm. "Rachel, I had a dream about dragons." Rachel stood quickly, squeezed Charles's hand. "I should go." But as she walked away, she looked back, and Charles knew. Everything was about to change. 6 months after Rachel arrived, Charles took the family to the coast for the weekend. It was Sophia's idea. "Can we go see the ocean? Please?" Nathan nodded eagerly. "We've never been." So they packed the car and drove 3 hours to a small beach town, rented a house right on the sand. Saturday morning, Charles woke early, found Rachel already outside watching the waves. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. She smiled. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how different everything is now." Charles sat beside her. The children were still asleep inside. The ocean stretched out before them, endless and calm. "I never thought I'd have this again," Rachel said softly. "A family, people to care for, a reason to wake up happy." "You gave that to us first." She shook her head. "No. You let me in. You trusted me when I broke every rule. You could have fired me that morning when you found me in your bed with the kids, but you didn't. Because you were right. They needed it." Rachel turned to him. "Charles, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "What are we doing?" His heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "I'm not the nanny anymore. We both know that. But I don't know what I am. And I need to know. Because I can't keep pretending this is just a job." Charles took her hand. "Rachel, you're not the nanny. You haven't been for months. You're—" He stopped, finding the words. "You're the person who saved my children, who brought life back into this house, who taught all of us that it's okay to love again. Then what does that make me? I don't know, but I know what I wanted to make you." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. Charles stood, pulled her up with him. "Rachel Baker, I'm 45 years old. 4 years ago, I lost my wife and thought I'd spend the rest of my life alone, watching my children suffer from something I couldn't fix. Then, you walked in with your old car and your canvas bag, and you broke every rule and gave us peace. You didn't replace what was lost, you rebuilt what was broken, and his voice cracked, I love you, and my children love you, and I don't want you to be the nanny. I want you to be their mother, and I want you to be— Yes, Charles stopped. I haven't asked yet. Rachel smiled through tears. I don't need you to. The answer is yes. Inside, footsteps. Sophia and Nathan appeared at the door, sleepy and curious. Why are you crying? Sophia asked. Rachel knelt down, pulled them both close. Because I'm happy, sweetheart. Really, really happy. Nathan looked at Charles. Is Rachel staying forever now? Charles looked at Rachel, at the woman who'd given up everything to heal his broken family, who'd lost her own child and chosen to love his, who'd taught them all that God doesn't waste our pain, He uses it to help us heal others. Yes, buddy, she's staying forever. Sophia threw her arms around Rachel. So you're our real mommy now? Rachel kissed her forehead. If that's okay with you. It's perfect. And as they stood there, four broken people who'd found each other in the darkness, Charles realized something. Healing doesn't come from money or credentials or perfect plans. It comes from someone willing to stay, someone willing to break the rules when the rules don't serve love, someone willing to sleep on the floor, cross every boundary, and love broken children as if they were her own. 3 months later, they married in the backyard. Small ceremony, close friends. And when Rachel knelt before Sophia and Nathan and promised to love them forever, to tell them stories about their first mommy, to never leave them, both children whispered, "We love you, Mommy Rachel." That night, Charles stood in his bedroom doorway, the same spot where he'd stood 9 months ago, shocked and confused. Now, Rachel sat on the bed waiting for him with a smile. "Come home," she whispered, and Charles finally did. The house that had been full of screaming for 4 years was now full of laughter. The children who couldn't sleep now slept peacefully every night. And the man who thought he'd lost everything learned that sometimes God takes the broken pieces of our lives and creates something more beautiful than we ever imagined. Not by erasing the pain, but by sending someone who understands it. Someone willing to stay in the dark until the light comes back. And it always does. If you let it.
He opened the hospital door expecting another dead end, another update, another quiet voice saying, "We're trying our best, sir." But what he saw, he wasn't ready for. He froze. Something stopped him in his tracks. The room, the machines, the silence. They were all familiar. But this was different. He couldn't speak. He couldn't move. For a long second, all he could do was watch. And in that moment, everything he thought he understood about love, sacrifice, and who God chooses to use broke wide open. Helen Jackson wasn't on the schedule that morning. She wasn't supposed to be at the hospital. But there are some days when the weight in your spirit is louder than the noise of the world. And that morning, Helen moved. She didn't bring attention. She didn't make a call. She just showed up, heart steady, hands shaking, obedience in her step. Outside, the pavement was soaked with cold rain. Inside, the hospital lights buzzed softly. Machines lined up like soldiers in a battle no one was winning. Faith Gibson, just 8 years old, was losing the fight. Blood counts dropping. No donor found. Time running out. The nurse said quietly, "There's no match. We're still waiting." But Helen already knew she was the match. O negative, the rarest type, the universal donor, the one no one had. She said nothing to anyone, just whispered to the nurse, "Please, don't say my name, not yet." And then she sat down, rolled up her sleeve, closed her eyes, and gave. There were no cameras, no family watching, just a quiet woman offering what she had, as if it didn't cost her anything. But it did. It cost her more than anyone will ever know. Because what she gave that day wasn't just blood. It was her past, her pain, her story, and all the love she never got to give. Until now. Before we go deeper into this story, I want you to pause and breathe. If something in your heart is stirring right now, let it. This is not just a story. It's a reminder that sometimes God answers prayer through the people we least expect. So if you believe in quiet miracles, if you've ever been carried by someone who asked for nothing in return, then like this video. Share it with someone who needs hope today. And in the comments, tell us where in the world you're watching from. Because this story is for every country, every heart, every soul that still believes love is real, and that God still moves in the silence. The morning air hadn't warmed yet. A thin mist clung to the sidewalks outside the Gibson estate, where Helen Jackson stood under the front archway, one hand curled around a paper cup of tea that had already gone cold. She didn't drink it. She wasn't there to warm herself. Her phone buzzed once, a group text from the household staff. Still no donor. Mr. Gibson's flight just landed. Updates soon. Helen didn't respond. She already knew. The night before, she had gone home and opened the drawer she hadn't touched in years, the one with her mother's Bible, a stack of old blood work papers, and a folded piece of paper with her blood type, O negative. She'd known, of course, but seeing it again, in black ink, made her sit down on the edge of her bed and whisper aloud, "Okay, Lord, if this is me, I won't wait." So now here she was, not in uniform, not on shift. No one had asked her to come. But God had. The hospital was quiet in that strange, in-between way, not rushed but not still. The scent of bleach hung heavy in the air, the kind of clean that comes after too much pain. She found the pediatric wing by instinct. A young nurse looked up from the station, eyebrows lifted slightly at the sight of her. I think I might be a match," Helen said softly. "I work for the family. But I checked. I'm O negative." The nurse blinked, then stood quickly. "You're sure?" Helen nodded. A short while later, she was seated in the small donor room alone, but for the hum of the machines and the sound of rain against the windows. They ran a test, confirmed the match, brought the paperwork. She didn't ask to see it, just signed. Quietly. When she rolled up her sleeve, her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what this moment held. The nurse offered juice and a blanket. Helen shook her head. "Just don't say anything. Please, not yet." The needle slid in, the bag began to fill, and in that sacred silence, something inside her broke open. Not in pain, but in surrender. She closed her eyes, and without meaning to, began humming. It was the same lullaby her mother had sung during storms. The same one she had once sung to Faith just a few weeks ago, when the child had cried herself to sleep after a long round of chemo. She didn't know all the words, but the melody lived in her hands, her chest, her soul. Outside that room, people passed by with clipboards and charts. Inside, blood flowed, one drop at a time, from the woman nobody ever noticed to the child everybody prayed for. 35 minutes later, Helen stood slowly. The nurse helped her into her coat. "You okay?" She nodded. But she didn't speak. The only sound she made was the quiet exhale of someone who had just given everything she had and didn't want to be thanked for it. Outside, the city had begun to wake. Traffic thickened. The sky stayed grey. But something had changed. Inside Faith's body, a miracle had begun. Helen climbed into a rideshare without saying a word. At the back gate of the Gibson estate, she walked in through the side entrance, unnoticed, unseen. She passed the kitchen, where the cook was reading a delivery invoice. No one looked up. She pulled her cardigan sleeve down over the bandage. Then stepped into Faith's room just to check. The child was sleeping. Her skin, still pale, had a different tone now, like color was thinking about returning. The machines beeped a steady rhythm, a quiet breath of life. Helen straightened the blanket, tucked it beneath the girl's chin, then placed the stuffed dolphin, Faith's favorite, closer to her side. She didn't cry, but something in her face softened, a private kind of peace. She turned to go. That's when she heard the front door. It swung open. Heavy steps. A man's voice, sharp, tired, already asking questions. Anthony Gibson had arrived. Helen stepped back into the hallway just as he turned the corner. He walked fast, briefcase in hand, phone at his ear. His eyes locked on the room. He didn't see her at first, but then he stopped. Just for a second. Their eyes met. Something flickered. A pause, a question not yet formed. But he moved on. Helen turned back toward the kitchen, pretending to busy her hands. Her knees still weak, her arm still tender. No one knew what she had just done, and she wasn't going to tell them. Not yet. What she had given wasn't just blood. It was a promise, and the kind of love that doesn't wait to be asked. The Gibson estate was quiet, not in the way peace feels, but in the way absence does. Everything in the house had its place. Marble floors without a single scuff, curtains pressed, pulled back just enough to let the morning light in, but never fully. Even the air felt measured, like it had been instructed not to move too freely. It was the kind of house where nothing was broken, but nothing felt alive. Anthony had built it that way. He believed in systems, in structure, a life where schedules solved problems and silence meant things were under control. Even grief, when it came, had been managed like a calendar event. After his wife died, a slow illness that stole her smile before her breath, Anthony never let himself fall apart. He buried himself in numbers, meetings, international calls. He took a week off to process and never spoke of it again. Faith was 5 at the time. She stopped asking why her mother wasn't coming home after the 3rd week. Anthony never explained it. He just hired more help, nannies, tutors, a private therapist who emailed progress updates twice a month. And Helen. Back then, she was just another name on a contract, a housekeeper, quiet, reliable. She had come through an agency. No fuss, no attachments, exactly what he wanted. Faith grew up in the echo of things left unsaid. She colored on paper, not walls, played alone quietly, asked small questions, never the big ones. At bedtime, it was Helen who stayed near the door a little longer. It was Helen who sat beside her when the nightlights flickered, Helen who learned her lullabies one line at a time. She never tried to replace anything, she just stayed. Not because it was her job, because the girl needed someone who wouldn't leave. Anthony didn't notice. Not fully. He'd pass by her room at night, phone pressed to his ear, nodding at the doctors on Zoom, never looking up long enough to see who was beside his daughter. He thought he was being strong, but strength without presence feels like absence in disguise. When Faith's symptoms began, the bruises, the tiredness, the unexplained fevers, Anthony handled it like a project. He booked appointments, researched the top oncologists, took notes, and when the diagnosis came, leukemia, he didn't cry. He asked for treatment options, spoke with legal about moving medical directives to his firm's private health plan, made lists. The word daughter was on every file, but he never said her name aloud during meetings. Then came the setbacks. She needed a blood transfusion and no match could be found. Her type was rare, hard to locate. The registry had nothing. The doctors told him gently, "We're working on it. It's not over." But to a man like Anthony, who always had a solution, it felt like failure. He didn't know how to fix this, and for the first time since losing his wife, he felt it again. That soundless panic, that helpless ache, the feeling that no amount of power, planning, or money could bend life to his will. He flew to New York for a biotech summit anyway, because action felt better than standing still. While he was gone, the house moved on without him, as it always had. Doctors came and went, nurses whispered to each other in hallways, Faith slept more, ate less, and Helen? Helen stayed. She packed meals Faith never finished, sat beside her during IV drips, folded the child's socks and prayed over each pair. No one told her to, but she did. She always had. By the time Anthony returned, it was early morning. His flight had landed late, his tie hung loose, his phone buzzed with unread messages. He didn't stop at home, he went straight to the hospital. Some part of him still hoped to be the first to arrive, the one who would walk in, take charge, and change the outcome. But when he opened that door, What he saw had already begun, and something inside him shifted. Not all at once, not enough to show, but something. He walked back out into the hallway. Didn't speak to Helen. Didn't ask a single question. But that night, at the house, he found himself pausing by Faith's door longer than usual. She was asleep, the dolphin toy tucked in close. A small drawing on the nightstand, a sun, 2 stick figures, and what looked like a woman in a red dress. The crayon above her head said, Helen. Anthony didn't smile, didn't cry, but he stood there, still, like a man hearing something he didn't quite recognize and wasn't ready to name. The rain hadn't stopped. It beat down in steady sheets over the hospital's parking lot as Anthony stepped out of the car. His coat collar turned up, briefcase in one hand, phone vibrating endlessly in the other. He didn't answer it. For once, he wasn't thinking about a call. He was thinking about her. Last night's updates had been short. Still weak, still no match, we're monitoring. It was the still that haunted him. The hallway smelled like bleach and late coffee. He passed 2 nurses. Neither looked up. His steps echoed down the corridor, sharp, practiced, impatient. Room 312. His hand paused on the handle for half a second. Then he opened it and froze. Everything inside him stopped. The machines hummed. Faith lay still, a soft flush returning to her cheeks. But it wasn't the machines that caught his eye. It was Helen, sitting beside the bed, head bowed, sleeve rolled up, her arm hooked to a line that fed directly into the transfusion bag, blood flowing, her blood, into his daughter's veins. No doctors in the room, no announcement, no warning, just her, still, steady, silent, giving. He blinked once. The briefcase slid from his fingers and hit the floor with a soft thud. Helen didn't look up. She was humming. A lullaby. So faint he almost thought he imagined it. The same song he'd heard Faith hum weeks ago while drawing, the one his wife used to sing. His chest tightened. Helen, he breathed, barely audible. She opened her eyes slowly. Didn't flinch. Didn't explain. Just met his gaze. And in that moment, she looked like someone who had already made peace with what she was doing, and didn't need permission to do it. Anthony stepped closer, slowly. A strange pressure building in his throat. Not anger, not confusion. Something older, something deeper. Guilt. He knelt down beside her without realizing. He wasn't a CEO now, not a billionaire, not a man used to control. Just a father, looking at the woman who was saving his child, without his knowledge, without his consent, without needing either. You should have told me, he whispered. Helen didn't smile, didn't soften. She just shook her head gently. You would have stopped me, he exhaled. His eyes dropped to the line in her arm. You could have passed out. You could have... But I didn't, she said softly. A beat of silence. Then, she needed blood. I had it. Like it was that simple. Like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. The machines beeped softly behind them. Faith stirred slightly in her sleep, her small hand twitching toward the blanket. Helen reached over with her free hand and tucked it under gently. Anthony watched the gesture, and for the first time in a long time, he felt small, not worthless, not weak, just small, in the presence of something bigger than money, bigger than titles. Grace. He stood up slowly. There were no more words. He looked at Helen again. This woman who had walked his halls quietly for years, who had done the dishes, turned down beds, washed laundry, and now, without asking, had given his daughter a chance to live. He stepped out into the hallway. He didn't cry, not yet, but his throat burned, and something inside his chest shifted, like stone moving for the first time in years. He didn't go to the nurses, didn't call his assistant, didn't draft a plan. He sat down on a bench outside the room and let himself feel it. Not all of it, not yet, but enough. Inside, Helen stayed with Faith, still connected, still humming. And outside, for the first time since his wife died, Anthony Gibson sat still long enough to listen to something he didn't know how to name. Helen stood in the hospital hallway, her sleeve down now, her hands tucked quietly in front of her. The transfusion had ended 20 minutes ago. The nurse had unhooked her gently, offered water and rest. Helen had nodded, said thank you, and sat for a few minutes. Long enough to be polite, not long enough to worry anyone. She didn't want attention. She just wanted Faith to be okay. Now she stood outside the room, waiting for nothing in particular, just being there. Her eyes, tired but steady, drifted toward the floor tiles. She traced the grout lines with her gaze, like they were roads going somewhere quiet. Then she felt it, the presence beside her. Anthony. He hadn't said a word since he walked out. Now he stood just a few feet away, arms crossed, back pressed to the opposite wall, like the weight of everything he couldn't say was holding him there. For a long moment they didn't look at each other, just silence, heavy, personal, close. Finally his voice came, low, tight, like it hurt to let the words out. "You didn't ask me." Helen didn't move. "No. You should have." Her eyes lifted now. Calm. Not cold, but calm in a way that didn't beg to be understood. "She didn't have time for permission," she said. He looked at her. Really looked. There was no defiance in her face, no apology either. Just a quiet truth sitting between them, unshaken. Anthony exhaled hard, the kind of breath that comes when you don't know what to do with what you're feeling. "You could have passed out," he said. "Or worse. You don't get to just—" "I didn't do it for you," she said. Soft. But it landed. He went still. Her voice didn't rise. It stayed steady, steady like she had been beside Faith for months now. Steady like someone who had already settled her soul long before anyone else caught up. "She's a child," Helen continued, "and she needed help, that's all." Anthony's jaw clenched. Not in anger, in shame. He had read every study, flown to every expert, bought more solutions than most families could dream of. But the one thing that saved his daughter came from the woman he barely noticed. The woman whose name he said only when something needed fixing. And here she was. Already fixed the most important thing. Without him. That stung in places he didn't know he still had. He pressed a hand to the bridge of his nose. "Do you know what would have happened if you collapsed? If something went wrong?" Helen's answer came without hesitation. "I would have bled out loving somebody," she said. That silenced him. She wasn't emotional when she said it. No tears, no drama. But Anthony's chest tightened anyway, because it wasn't the words that got him. It was how true they were. They both stood there, the hum of hospital lights above them. Down the hall, a janitor pushed a mop bucket. A nurse gave someone directions to radiology. The world moved on, like nothing sacred had just happened here. Anthony glanced back toward the room. "Why didn't you tell them to call me?" he asked quietly. Helen hesitated this time. Then, "Because you would have made it about rules, about risk, about policy." He didn't argue. She stepped toward him then, just a little, enough that he could see the softness return to her voice. "But for her, it wasn't about any of that," she said. "It was about time, and whether she'd live long enough to wait for another match." Her voice cracked slightly on that word, wait, not enough to be dramatic, just enough to be human. Anthony looked away. His eyes burned, but he wouldn't cry. Not here. Not yet. She turned, about to leave, but he spoke again, this time softer. "I didn't know you were O-negative." Helen stopped, looked over her shoulder. "You never asked." She walked down the hallway, not fast, not slow, and Anthony stayed where he was, still pressed to the wall. He didn't follow. But for the first time he watched her go, not as a maid, not as an employee, but as a woman who had done what he couldn't. She had given blood, but she'd also given truth, and now he would have to sit with it. The house had been too quiet since the hospital. Anthony could feel it in the walls, the stillness after something sacred had happened. It wasn't the same kind of silence as before, not the cold, empty kind that had followed his wife's passing. This was different. This was the kind of silence that made space for something new. Faith had returned home the next evening, weak but stronger. She slept deeply, her breathing soft, her body slowly receiving what it had been missing. Helen stayed nearby, not hovering, just present, the same way she always had been. But now, Anthony saw it, every detail. The way she folded Faith's blankets as if she were tucking in something fragile. The way she moved through the rooms like she knew their rhythm better than anyone else. The way she whispered prayers when she thought no one was listening. He noticed, and it unsettled him. Not because it was wrong, because it had been there all along, and he'd missed it. 3 days later, it happened. An email. Subject line: urgent. Story leak. Boston General. Anthony opened it, eyes skimming fast. An anonymous hospital source had spoken to a reporter. The story had already gone to press. Billionaire's housekeeper donates rare blood to save his daughter's life. No names, no photos, but it wouldn't take long for people to connect the dots. He sat back in his chair, stared at the screen. He felt it then, not anger, not even fear, exposure. This had been holy, quiet, a moment that wasn't meant for headlines. But now, the world would try to take it, twist it, monetize it. His phone rang 2 minutes later. PR director. "We can spin this," she said, almost cheerfully. "Turn it into a brand story. Heroism, humility, corporate empathy." "No," Anthony said flatly. A pause. "Sir?" "I said no. This isn't ours to use." He ended the call and stood up slowly. Walked out of the office, down the corridor past framed degrees and polished glass. The house didn't feel like a house anymore. It felt like a place where truth had finally arrived. And he didn't know how to sit with it. He found Helen in the side garden, kneeling by the edge of a raised flower bed. It was where she liked to be when the house got too loud. The hydrangeas were fading with the season. She pulled at the weeds with care, pressing the soil back into place with both palms, like she needed to feel something grounded. He stood there for a moment before speaking. "It's out," he said. Helen looked up slowly. "They leaked it," he continued. "Someone at the hospital." She didn't react, not with fear, not with surprise. "I thought they might," she said softly. He stepped closer. "They want to use you," he said. "Turn you into a headline, a strategy, a symbol." "I'm none of those," she replied. "I know." A beat. "I told them no," he added. "I told them this wasn't a campaign. This wasn't yours to give away." Helen stood then, brushing her hands clean. Their eyes met. Not like employee and employer, but like two people holding the weight of something unspoken between them. "It wasn't supposed to be seen," she said. "It wasn't meant for cameras." He nodded. "But I saw it." Another pause. Gentle. "That's the only part that matters to me," she whispered. Something in his chest cracked at that, like a door that had been closed too long, finally letting air in. Back inside, Faith was awake. She was coloring on the floor, wrapped in a blanket. Beside her, a drawing, 3 stick figures under a crooked roof. One taller, one small, one with curls. He picked it up. Above the roof, Faith had written just one word. Home. Anthony stood there for a while. The world outside was buzzing. The media would move fast. But in this house, something holy had taken root. Not because of wealth, not because of effort, but because one woman gave quietly and taught him how to see. It was late, the kind of quiet that only comes after everyone else has gone to sleep. The lights in the hallway were dimmed. Faith was finally resting, a soft rhythmic breath rising beneath her blanket, her favorite dolphin tucked close to her chest. Anthony stood in the doorway of the kitchen. He didn't announce himself. Helen was at the counter pouring water into the kettle. She moved like someone who belonged there, not with authority, but with familiarity, like this space had learned her rhythm over time. He watched her for a moment, not because he meant to intrude, but because he wasn't ready to speak yet. There was something in the air, not heavy, but not light, something waiting. She turned slightly, sensing him. "You want tea?" she asked, without looking directly at him. He stepped in. "Sure." The kettle hissed gently behind her. She reached for 2 mugs, simple, chipped at the rim, not the kind of cups that were displayed in formal cabinets. These were real, used, trusted. Anthony sat at the small table in the corner. He hadn't sat there in months, maybe years. Not since before his wife got sick. Not since this house became a museum of survival instead of a place to live. Helen handed him a mug. She didn't sit, not yet. Just leaned against the counter, holding her own tea, both hands wrapped around it. He took a slow sip, and then the words came. Quiet, but not unsure. "You've been raising her, haven't you?" She didn't flinch. He looked up. "All this time I thought I was doing enough, paying the right people, building the right structure, keeping things in place." His voice cracked slightly. "But you've been the one actually loving her." Helen set her tea down gently. She still didn't sit. "She's easy to love," she said. He nodded, looked down at his mug. "I don't know when I stopped showing up," he said. "Maybe it was after Claire. Maybe it was before that." His voice faded. The kettle clicked off behind them. Helen finally moved, pulled out the chair across from him, sat down. "I don't blame you," she said softly, "for grieving the way you did." Anthony met her eyes. "But Faith needed you," she added. "Not your money, not your plans, you." The silence between them thickened, not in tension, but in truth. It filled the room like warm air. He looked away. "I didn't think I had anything left to give." Helen's hands stayed wrapped around her cup. "You do," she said. "You just forgot how to give it." There it was. The break. Not loud, not sharp. But it split something open in him, something he hadn't let anyone touch. He set his mug down, pressed a hand to his eyes. He didn't sob, didn't fall apart. But the stillness in his chest, the wall he'd built around his grief, cracked. He exhaled slowly, like releasing something he'd carried too long. Helen waited. Not to be thanked, not to be seen. Just waited. And then he spoke again. "I've been trying to fix everything," he whispered, "with control, with strategy. But she's still sick, and I'm still lost." Helen leaned forward slightly. "Then stop fixing. Start feeling." He looked up, surprised. "That's harder," he admitted. "I know," she said, "but it's the only thing she needs from you now." A silence settled between them, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like honesty. For the first time in years, Anthony wasn't giving orders, and Helen wasn't just following them. They were just 2 people, sharing a table, a burden, and something that felt like trust. He reached into his coat pocket then, placed a manila envelope on the table. "I had legal draft this earlier," he said. "It's a compensation package, bonuses, full benefits, paid leave, private health care for life." She stared at it, didn't touch it. "I don't need this," she said. Anthony blinked. "What do you need?" he asked. Helen's eyes softened. "For her to stay alive," she said quietly, "and for you to see her." The tea between them went cold, because something sacred had passed across that table. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something close. The next morning, the house didn't feel different, not to anyone else. The windows still framed the trees the same way. The cook still unpacked groceries at 7 a.m. sharp. The cleaning crew still arrived just before the gardener's truck pulled up. But something under the surface had shifted, like the floor had moved a fraction in the night, just enough to make you feel it in your step. Faith was awake early, propped up by pillows, a blanket pulled to her chin, coloring a new page. Dolphins again. Helen had made oatmeal the way she always did. Almond milk, bananas, mashed so she wouldn't have to chew. A pinch of cinnamon. But this morning she didn't leave the tray on the table. She carried it in, sat beside Faith, watched her eat. Faith didn't say much. She didn't have to. When a child feels safe, Their silence sounds different. It was the silence of someone being seen. Anthony stood just outside the doorway. He didn't walk in. He just watched. He saw the way Faith leaned into Helen's side as she colored. The way Helen smoothed her hair back like it was second nature. It was second nature. And for the first time, he didn't feel pushed out by that. He felt invited. Later that afternoon, he found himself walking toward the nursery. No phone, no meeting agenda. Just him. The room still smelled faintly like lavender and warm wood. Helen had opened the window just enough to let the breeze in. Soft music played from a little speaker on the dresser. Faith was asleep again. A half-finished drawing lay on the rug beside her. Anthony picked it up. 3 stick figures again, this time under a sun with long, stretching rays, the same roof over all of them. He stared at the picture longer than he meant to, and when he placed it back down, he did so gently as like it mattered. Because it did. He found Helen later in the laundry room, folding towels, a basket beside her. He stood in the doorway. She noticed him, nodded once, and kept folding. He didn't speak right away. He didn't know how to. There was nothing urgent to say. No task, no correction, no performance, just presence. And somehow that felt harder. "How's she doing?" he asked. Helen folded another towel, neatly, precisely. She smiled when the music came on, she said. "First time in a week." Anthony exhaled, slowly. "I want to learn," he said. She looked up now. "Learn what?" He swallowed. "How to be here, like you've been." Helen didn't answer, not right away. She set the towel down, met his eyes. "Then start," she said. And then she left him there, not unkindly, just honestly. That evening, the table was set for 3, not just for tradition, but because Faith had asked. "Can Helen sit with us tonight?" she whispered. "Like real dinner?" Anthony didn't hesitate. He nodded. Helen served the food, but she didn't return to the kitchen. She took a seat. Faith grinned like it was the most normal thing in the world. The meal was quiet. No toasts, no speeches, just shared bites. A few questions about dolphins, a joke about too much pepper in the soup. At one point, Anthony reached to pass the bread. Their hands brushed. Neither pulled back too quickly. It wasn't a moment meant for words, but something passed between them. Something that said, "We're trying now." And for the first time, the silence in that house, it didn't feel like absence, it felt like peace. They didn't say the word family that night. They didn't have to. Because something in the way Faith leaned her head on Helen's shoulder after dinner, and the way Anthony didn't look away, said it already lived here. It came in a plain envelope, no warning, no ceremony. Just a quiet thud on Anthony's desk late one morning. Hospital letterhead stamped in the corner, neatly folded inside a single page. "In preparation for public clarification and internal review regarding the transfusion, please approve the following statement." He read the draft once, then again. His jaw tightened on the second line. "The child received an emergency blood donation from an internal support staff member. Due to protocol, the identity and role of said donor will remain confidential." He stared at that word. Support staff. That's what they called her. The woman who had given her blood to save his child, who had shown up before the doctors, before him. Support staff. He didn't sign it. Instead, he picked up the phone. "Get me the hospital director," he said. "Now." That afternoon, the boardroom smelled like lemon polish and printer ink. 3 executives sat across from him, folders in hand. They welcomed him with tight smiles, told him how grateful they were for his cooperation, how delicately they planned to handle the media spin. Anthony said nothing. He pulled the statement from his coat pocket and set it on the table. "Is this how you want the story told?" he asked, voice calm but cold. "Respectfully," one of them said, "we're protecting privacy. It's standard language. We're calling her a staff member, so it doesn't trigger legal questions about risk or liability." "She's not a category," Anthony replied. "She's a person." Another executive cleared his throat. "With public pressure growing, we're trying to minimize exposure." Anthony leaned forward. I told you I'd walk if you tried to reduce her to a footnote. A pause. The room shifted. Then, what do you want it to say? Someone finally asked. Anthony looked up. I want it to say the truth. That night, Helen was in the study, organizing Faith's art supplies. The crayons had been scattered across the floor, drawings half-finished, suns with long arms, smiling stick figures that barely stayed inside the lines. She didn't notice Anthony at first. Not until he set the envelope on the table beside her, she glanced at it. What's this? A rewritten statement, he said. I didn't sign the other one. Helen hesitated. You didn't have to do that. I did. He sat on the edge of the armrest, not too close. I'm done letting other people define what matters in my house. She looked at him, guarded, soft. They'll still try, she said. They'll call it charity or spin or feel-good fluff. Let them try, he said. But we'll write the truth. Helen picked up the letter. Read the new words slowly. On October 5th, during a critical medical emergency, a woman named Helen Jackson, who has served our home not just with professionalism, but with heart, made a personal sacrifice that saved my daughter's life. This was not procedure. This was not protocol. This was love. And we will not let it go unnamed. Her hand paused over the last line. She didn't save my child as a staff member. She saved her as a human being. She folded the paper slowly, not tightly, then placed it back on the table like it was something that belonged. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The light from the floor lamp washed the room in a kind of hush, not silence, but the kind of quiet that waits for something holy. Then Anthony stood. I'd like you to be there when I sign it officially. Helen looked up. Why? Because it's your name on the line. She gave a small smile. Not wide, but real. All right, she said. Later that evening, Faith sat curled up on the living room couch, drawing again. This time, she was working on a new picture. A house, colored in soft yellow with windows this time. 3 figures beneath it. One tall, one smaller, one in a red dress. And just above the door, written in blocky crayon letters, "The truth lives here." Outside, the sky was starting to clear, not fully, just enough to see the first stars. And inside that house, and for the first time in years, every person inside was seen. It was a Tuesday. Nothing extraordinary about the day. The sun came up slow over the trees behind the Gibson estate. The city beyond was already humming. Delivery trucks, crosswalk signals, early alarms no one thanked. Inside the house, the kitchen light had been on since 6:30. Helen stood at the stove stirring oatmeal. Not because she had to, not because it was her shift, because Faith was home, and she liked it warm. Anthony entered the kitchen just as she was slicing the bananas, half a second too late to offer help. She glanced at him, offered a nod. No words yet. They didn't always need words anymore. He reached for the bowls. That morning they moved around each other like people who had known one another longer than the titles on their paperwork suggested. Not family, not quite friends, but something chosen. Something that had survived the worst of life and quietly decided to stay. Faith came in moments later, barefoot, hair messy from sleep, her dolphin toy tucked beneath one arm. She climbed into her chair with no urgency, no complaint, just the ease of a child who knew she belonged. Helen set her bowl down first. Anthony followed. He sat too. And they ate, not with formality, but with familiarity. Not with noise, but with presence. After breakfast, Faith wandered off to the family room, a stack of crayons in her hand. Anthony stood, began clearing dishes. Helen moved to wipe the counter. I spoke to the hospital, he said. They approved the new statement. It goes public next week. Helen didn't stop wiping, but he saw her shoulders soften. You didn't have to keep pushing, she said. I wasn't pushing, he replied. I was protecting. A pause. I'm learning, he added. She turned to face him now, folded the cloth. I can see that. That afternoon, Faith taped something to the fridge. No announcement. No, look what I made. She just walked over, placed it there with 2 magnets, and went back to the living room. Anthony walked into the kitchen later and saw it, a hand-drawn picture, a house with 3 figures, one tall, in a suit, one small, with curls and a dolphin in her hand, and one in a red dress with a warm smile and kind eyes. The names were scribbled above their heads. Me, Daddy, Helen. But what stopped him wasn't the figures. It was the word written just above the roof, in careful block letters. Home. He stood there longer than he meant to. His hand rested on the fridge door, but he didn't open it. He just looked. And for a brief moment, his throat tightened, not with grief, but with recognition. Because somewhere between blood transfusions and quiet meals, between hospital chairs and early mornings, something had happened. Not loudly, not suddenly, but faithfully. They had become something that couldn't be named in legal documents or medical reports, something that couldn't be bought or scheduled or delegated. Family, not by title, but by choice. That night, they all sat at the same table again. No staff lines, no roles, just people. Helen brought dessert, banana bread, still warm, a little uneven around the edges. Faith giggled at the shape of it. Anthony took a bite, closed his eyes for a second longer than necessary. It wasn't the food. It was the quiet, the safety, the grace of it all. No one said thank you. They didn't need to. Some gifts aren't meant to be thanked for. They're meant to be honored, lived, and protected. Later, long after Faith had fallen asleep, Anthony passed by the kitchen one last time. The light was still on, the drawing still on the fridge. He paused, touched the corner of the paper gently with his fingertips, then whispered, not loudly, not to anyone, just to the room, "Thank you." And for the first time in a very long time, he meant it.